This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors podcast. You say the COVID edition, but we're never going to be out of COVID, so that's fine. Okay, so I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-hosting today with me is Vanessa Valiente. Woo! And our guest is Elmon Dean Todd. Woo! Hey, let's talk about what we're drinking here. I found at the back of the fridge 2 of my Angry Orchard peach mangoes. I'm super excited that I discovered that I hid them from myself. It's a good thing. Vanessa, what are you drinking?
Jealous. I'm super jealous. I love that. I'm just doing some rum and Coke. So in my amazing Drinking with Authors cup.
Oh, yes, our Drinking with Authors swag that all of our guests get. Yes. Okay, Elmon, what are you drinking?
Since someone stole mine out of the fridge, I'm just drinking this, nothing special. So, as you guys get, more intoxicated as we go along, I'll be just watching with humor.
Well, regardless of the intoxication, most people will just watch with humor when they're watching this particular podcast. Okay.
Well, they say I'm already mad, so no worries. I don't need alcohol, so carry on.
Awesome sauce. Okay, so you have we cyberstock. So let's talk a little bit about your writing. When did you actually start writing?
Professionally or like for the books?
No,
or just
when did you start writing? When were you like, you know what, I want to write stories?
Probably when I was 10 years old. I used to play loads of the role-playing games on those consoles. Nintendo was out, just saying how old I am. So Nintendo was out, and I was like, oh, I love these role-playing game stories, and then Dungeons and Dragons and all that. So started writing then, and but didn't really do anything professional until one day. I worked at a police department, and my sergeant, she does art, and we decided one day, we were like, we never really done our passions. My passion was writing, and hers was art, and she somewhat put it on hold, and I put mine on hold, and so by the way, there was hardly any calls that night, so so there was downtime. So during this downtime, we were like, let's get back into what we want to do. And she works heavily with Pensacon, so she says, well, if you get your book, we can get a booth. I'll get you a booth, and I'll get myself, So she done her art. She went full time in her art. She got it done, and I got my, I finished my book, and that's when it started. And it's been an avalanche ever since.
Very, very cool. So I was looking right now. It looks like you have 2 books out. Am I correct?
2, almost done with the 3rd, and we're also have a video game on the book series in development too.
That is awesome. That is very cool. Okay. So you were a gamer. You said Nintendo. You can't make jokes like that makes you so old, because I was around when the first Atari came out. So
that was my first system.
Yes, craziness.
Yeah.
So you were 10 though, and playing role-playing games, but then you transitioned and you're a police officer.
Actually, I got 4 days left.
Oh.
So yes, I put in my resignation so I can do full-time writing, because I couldn't do the conventions, and I couldn't do what you call the book tours and all that you need to do to promote yourself, and because we're short basically, and getting leave is hard, and so it started conflicting, and I was like, if I'm going to grow, if I'm going to do this, I need to drop this. I mean, it was really holding me back. So, and then also my 3rd book, I would have probably had it done, a year ago, but I couldn't get it done because, you got the training on the weekend, you got to go to the gun range, I mean, that stuff might be fun for other people, but I've been doing it for 10 years. So when I hear gun range, I'm thinking of, oh, that gun recoil is going to hit my hand so many times, I'm going to have blisters and cuts and all that stuff. So, and then, when it's cold or hot outside. So yes, writing's a bit, a little bit better.
No, that makes sense. You're going full time. That is very bold and very brave.
Well, thank you. Or quite mad. I mean, depending on who you ask.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so how come you went law enforcement instead of creative route? What made you make that choice?
Well, I always liked adventure, and I mean, I lived in Europe. I spent most of my 20s living abroad. So I lived in Switzerland. I went to uni in Ireland for a time, and then I also worked in Japan, Japan and Switzerland. So as an English teacher. So when I came back over here, I tried the corporate world. My mouth often got me in trouble because I'm pretty blunt. Then I decided to get law enforcement, where I guess you could be sarcastic or whatever, and it tends to get by as long as you don't say something really stupid. And it's quite adventuresome. I mean, you really find yourself in interesting situations. Like this past summer, I had to serve civil papers, and I was in the middle of the countryside on dirt roads, only horses went on to try to find some house. I mean, and I was like, hey, this is kind of like going on an adventure. So there's that bit. It kind of helps with the creative writing process anyway, because, some descriptions you might hear in my book, of corpses and all that after a battle really did not require so much imagination because, I've seen that a few times, so.
You've seen
really
a corpse after an epic sword fight?
More after gunshots, or just, heart attack or something like that, or maybe fell, never got back up again, homicide, or what they call, I guess, they don't really do natural causes anymore. They always have to say something like, aneurysm caused this, the fall and this happened. So, but yeah, no, I haven't seen anyone died from stabbings before.
That's probably a good thing, right?
Do you feel like your training as a police officer, especially handling guns and stuff? Because I feel like you write high fantasy. So do you feel like that incorporates a lot into your world building and characters and your action scenes? Like, do you feel like it's easier to write action scenes because of your background, or?
Oh yes. So I have a character named Sir Flane. He's actually modeled after one of his former Marines who trained me on the range. And this man always had something witty to say. I mean, he had an extremely high IQ. So he was extremely intelligent and knew a lot about everything. And he always had something incredibly witty to say to someone, always making fun of everyone. But I mean, really, if he's making fun of you and insulting you, especially if you're new, it means he likes you. Because if he's not insulting you and he's speaking really seriously, he usually doesn't like you. And, you might want to be mindful around him. Yeah, I modeled that after him. Some of the stuff I've seen, like action scenes you were speaking of, stabbings and such. I mean, when I watch a movie and they stab humans can really live through a lot. I mean, I've seen people with several gunshot wounds in the abdomen, and they're just, they're in pain. I've seen one guy shot in the head. He was crawling around in the parking lot, and, he was telling, and he told us, who shot him and everything. I mean, he had brain damage, obviously. He couldn't, he wouldn't live a normal life again, but he still had some capabilities to communicate and all that. So stuff you see in the movies, or even other books where someone gets stabbed and they fall over dead, that doesn't happen. It takes the humans have a tendency to cling to life very well. So it's very hard to kill someone. That's what I've seen, because I've seen stuff where, wow, you've taken a lot of punishment and you're still alive. So, anyway, sorry to get gruesome. You said this was an adult show, right?
You're talking to somebody who writes about serial killers. So
I was okay. Erica's like, I love hearing about this stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead. Tell me more. Just kidding. That's fine. I can't ask these questions. Eventually somebody will search my browser history. Okay. So when you finally sat down, so you guys had the idea to do it, take us through the process of coming up with the story. Where did you get the story from?
As I said, I was speaking to my sergeant about writing again. And really the past 10 years, so I don't know, are you familiar with Margaret Weiss? She wrote Dragonlance novels.
Yes. And
Okay,
Tracy Hickman, yeah.
so I used to be on a personal level. I dated Margaret's daughter Elizabeth for about 2 years. So during that time, Margaret and Elizabeth both gave me loads of advice on how to write and such like that. It was nice training. For free, really, just during conversations during a walk or whatever. So during that time, I came up with an idea of the Godshard, which is basically, a remnant of a dead god, which has loads of power, and the races, the kingdoms go after this source of infinite energy to harness it. So I had that for the longest time. I had that idea. I just never wrote anything. And then one day I decided to, put that idea onto paper. And first thing I did was get an artist. So I went on the internet, searching through many portfolios because I wanted the art first. I wanted to communicate with an artist first. And then after I got an artist, I went through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artists. And finally I found a guy in Singapore. And funny thing is whatever I said to him, he was able to put whatever was in my mind onto like the canvas and or I guess your digital tablet or whatever you do nowadays, and bring it to life. So that was really cool. And now we've been working together ever since. Now he does all my video game illustrations as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool.
So does he also do the book covers as well?
Yes, he does the book covers, the interior. They're black and white sketches I have inside the books too, because I have, I separate my acts with an actual illustration, and then I just like eye candy, I suppose. That's I don't. If you're a beginning author and you don't have the money for it, I highly don't recommend it. But I was working a full-time job, and sometimes I get overtime, so. My overtime money would go to him. So and then when the video game came along, I tried some other more cartoony looks, anime look, and I couldn't find anyone that stuck. So I asked him, I said, hey, do you want to do this too? Can you do an anime? Because I never seen him do an anime style. He did like a lot of DC Marvel style. That's what stuff he really liked. And he says, well, I can try. So I showed him some stuff, and so his stuff is not quite like Japanese anime. It's like a little bit different for the video game, but it's his own style, and I really like it. And I was like, oh, well, let's continue this then. So I feel lucky. And he's also my friend now, or I consider him a friend now. So, I said, hey, if I come to Singapore, we're going to hang out.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And like,
Wow.
do you like, because I know initially you gave him like a concept for your illustrations, but do you ever get in a situation where you kind of like don't know what you want illustrated and you're like, hey, here, read the book, and he reads the book and gives you ideas?
No, I just give him a few paragraphs because English is not his first language, so I don't even think he's read the book. But what I'll do is I'll describe the characters in the best way I can, and he'll take it from there. And luckily, I don't know how he does it. He must be a mind reader or something, but he just he puts it right onto there, and I was like, oh, that actually turned out just like I want. Actually, a little better. That actually was prettier than what was in my imagination. So good job. Yeah. And he's done that with every single project. There was a few. I'm like, okay, can you change the way her eye shape is, or whatnot, or can you add some more, muscles to this female right here? Because, she's like a warrior. I want to see some, abs perhaps or whatever, But other than that, he's been spot on. Just your typical editing stuff you would deal with when you write,
Yeah, for sure.
So, Godshard, you started this whole thing. What did your sergeant do? I thought she was the artist. What happened there?
Wait, she does her own art.
Did I drink too much cider to begin with? What happened?
I hope not yet. The night's still early, we haven't seen you do anything wild yet. So that's a dare, by the way.
I don't need to be dared. You obviously haven't listened to the podcast yet, because you know that I don't need to be dared. But continue. What does your sergeant do? What was her part?
So to answer your question, my sergeant, she does her own art. She does more of a children's and motivation and stuff. She does monsters. So her monsters, they have these big eyes. They usually have an inspirational quote, and she also creates figures. So something completely different, and it's her own stuff. We usually will have a side-by-side booth, although she does the security also for the convention, that particular convention. So I never see her. She has to get someone else to help run it. So sometimes it'll be, somebody I know or her friends or other police officers even. Or whenever they're off. But yeah, no, she doesn't do any art associated with mine. We were just talking about dreams and pursuing them, and and we encouraged each other. So I kind of motivated each other.
No,
That
that's
cool.
awesome. It's good to have somebody who motivates you. We can say the convention. We can say Pensacon. This is where we found him drinking with authors fans. We found him at Pensacon.
I think I mentioned that already, though.
Excalibur from the. No, just kidding. We could get really dramatic there.
I'm just trying to remember because I was at Pensacon. Did she have a table that day this year? I'm trying to remember what her creatures were now. Because
it's Maria's Monster Menagerie.
I feel like I remember seeing that.
Vanessa, we are talking about Elmon's books.
I know, but
you were super cute with your rum and coke, but I need you to stop being pretty and pay attention to the podcast that we're actually doing.
Give a shout out for her. I don't mind. She'll love it. I can point her to it, so she'll love. I hope she will. She still has a little bit to go.
If you're listening, Vanessa would like to see your artwork. So,
right now.
No, I was.
No, she's making fun of me because,
okay.
You can't have an episode without her, no, Vanessa did something stupid again.
Sorry, I
did not say you did something stupid. I said you went off script. I would never say the word stupid. You're super pretty today. Super pretty.
Yeah, apparently.
Very proud of you. So, anyway, so you had some nice inspirational art from people who wrote the Dragonlance series. What were the kind of books that you read that inspired you to want to be a writer even more?
Really, I don't read. I used to read fantasy when I was little or younger, but I don't read fantasy. When people ask what I love to read, it's I usually say, I read stuff on, memoirs, entrepreneurs, business books, and history. So usually I don't read fantasy and the stuff I write for fun. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. I'm a little surprised though, because a lot of people tend to read the genres that they're writing in to kind of understand what's out there. So you gamed a lot. Do you still game?
Like Dungeons and Dragons, not so much. I was also a writer for, and still am, I'm still on the staff, but RPGamer, which is, they cover role-playing games on consoles and Steam. So I wrote for them. I started writing for them in 2019, and they send me, free games, or they'll mail it to me, or nowadays it's digital code. And you have to play through it. So most of my recent gaming was from stuff they sent me and what stuff I'd have to write. So but as far as occasionally I'll get a game that's like, okay, I've been waiting to play that, I'll have to play that all the way through, but it's very few and far between. I really don't have time to play video games as much anymore. So if I do write, and one thing about reading fantasy or even some games, I try not to get those into my head, because if I write, I feel like those ideas seep in. Whereas if I read history, actually, a lot of my books do have some historical references here and there, but most people wouldn't know because it's some, for example, I've been to England and I'd go to some obscure village which has its own history, but not many people have been there. Even some of the locals might not know it very well. And I'll just add that bit, mix that bit in with a bit of fantasy embellishment.
Yeah, I'm the same way too. I try not to read too much fantasy all the time, just because it's what I write the most as well. And also it's always good to read all genres or do any kind of creative outlet, like whether it's video games, watching films, or podcasts or anything, it's a great way to kind of be more unique in the genre you do like to write, so that you're not writing the same thing that everyone else is. So it's always good to have like all these different influences.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to put it. And you know, we were talking about Margaret earlier. Margaret was kind of like me in a way. She doesn't read fantasy at all. You know, I've read some of the stuff she's read. Patrick O'Brien, which, you know, has those, you know, during the colonial era where they go on the ships and, you know, sail and have the ship battles and all that. that was some of the stuff she's read, but her fans don't really know that, or a lot of her fans don't know that. And you know, and we would trade books like this. She'd hand me a book like that, and I'd devour it, you know, because I love stuff like that. So, but yeah, historical fiction you can add to the list. Actually, I do read some historical fiction. It depends on the author, you know.
Yeah.
No, totally.
Now I have to ask, what do you mostly like? What point of view do you write in? Like, do you find it easier to write in like third person? Because I love fantasy, my kind of go-to, because I love switching POVs, and not like dual, but I like a huge ensemble cast. So I typically write in third person. Is that something that you normally gravitate towards, or do you do something
exactly
else?
as you said? I like to have a cast of characters. I love to switch even between the villains, between, you know, first person, you're very limited. You're limited to the protagonist, and that's great. Some people really pull it off. I mean, there are some books I've read first person I absolutely love, and I said this won't work any other way. You know, and memoirs, obviously, you know, it has to be first person.
Yeah.
So, but third person, yes, I prefer that the most. With mine, I'm not opposed to writing first person. I just haven't done it with fantasy yet. But my series will be third person. I mean, it is third person and will be third person.
I always feel it's easier to do that with more contemporary pieces, or like, you know, more in like our world, doing first person versus. I would love to see someone pull off a first person in a fantasy. It's not something you kind of like rarely do. So, but do you feel like now, are you like more, do you world build a lot before you write, or do you just kind of like pants it?
Before you answer that question, we actually have to take a quick break. I love that you're on a roll though, Vanessa. I don't even know what's happened to you, but I was sassy to you earlier and you've been on a roll and I love it. But we have to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, we're back. Fans on and everything. Okay, Vanessa, you were taking over the podcast and asking a question. Go for it.
Yeah, no, it was back to like, do you feel like you do a whole bunch of world building? Do you have like a world Bible? I ask this because I do, and mine's like super extensive. And so and especially when you're trying to keep track of like all those characters or like religions or the worlds you create, do you feel that it's something that you would do in your process of writing, or do you do something completely different?
Completely different, although I like your method much better than mine, because I try to keep it all in my head and I take minimal notes on that. And when Garner came along and wrote God is Tier, which I believe he spoke with you last time, he made a whole loads and loads of notes, and he put them on a document, and I thought that was brilliant. But no, I usually go right into, you know, more of the plot and the characters and center around that. I mean, I do have the world already established in my head of where I want the characters to be and what the, you know, So it's not too much work, but I mean, except maybe the details. And it does cost me time. And like, so for example, I'm doing Blood Night now, which is the sequel to Curse Night. And sometimes I have to go back to Curse Night because I was like, oh, well, what was this bit about again?
Mhm.
Or what did these people do again in this country? But I noticed one problem with world building. Some people, especially beginning writers, they do the endless world building. They just do the world building. They want to create and craft the perfect setting, and they never get done. They never start the actual, prose. They never go into the book, or they never, start their scenes. But they have a big world, and I mean, I've spoken to a few people. I just said, just get started on your book. You can always go back to the world building if you need to. I mean, even the next books, you can continue that as long as you keep going with the plot.
Mhm. Mhm.
So how did you do book 3 then? Because epic fantasy, and especially because you've created a world in which things operate in magic and gods and stuff like that. How did you not forget things, my friend?
Well, I have the plot outline already. So even the books that aren't written, I already know what's going to happen with the outline. Now, of course, you have, and you probably had this a few times. I take it you guys outline too. I mean, some people don't. Some people just write from.
Erica does not.
But I don't write fantasy. So that's a big difference, is that I don't write fantasy. And I think fantasy is a much different thing when you write sci-fi and fantasy, because you guys are partially constructing rules on how things work in the world, where I write very realistic, well, kind of realistic, I guess. Well, realistic if you watch any serial killer shows. Realistic stuff in real world situations that happen. So even if I sort of make up the name of a town or steal a town name or something like that, I have to do research to go, am I doing the town justice, right? But I don't have to world build the town because the town is already there, and I can look up. Google Maps is a wonderful thing. I can look up and see all of the things that I want to see in the town, and it takes about 10 minutes of Google search, and I can see, do they have a bus line? Do they have a railway? Like any parts that I want to add when it comes to that. But I'm researching somebody else's, our world that's already created versus a fantasy world. And fantasy worlds have gods and magic and all kinds of things and stuff like that goes on. I'm just curious how you, as you're building this and you have so many books, how you track that. Now, keeping in mind, George R.R. Martin was a pantser, very much like me. He didn't do world building notes and stuff like that. So, and you can tell in some of his books, they get a little hazy at times and change things. But how do you keep track for yourself when you're going to write book 3, for instance?
Like I said, I had some of what goes on in book 3 already mapped out from the very beginning. As far as the outlines, yeah, that's like I call the loose outline. I don't like to do a definite outline because as writers, I'm sure you've had this, you have your talent, which is what helps you, the hours and time you spent learning how to be a writer to craft your book. And then you have that little sudden spark of inspiration when you're writing that just comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you write this great scene. And you ever look at some of your older stuff and you're like, hey, how did I write this? And you can't recreate it. It just came. So that's the only thing I don't like about outlines, because some scenes I have that sudden inspiration and I write a interesting and scene that just comes out of nowhere, and it just completely uproots whatever I had written or outlined already. And I call that like just what was that spark of inspiration, I suppose is the best word. But those are the moments I like to go for, because that's what produces really great writing. Whereas your talent will produce good stuff. I mean, you see good writers and they produce books every year, bestsellers, but it's a lot of the same stuff. But you'll see as someone who's a complete beginner, their first book, and they'll be absolutely smashing, but because it's that inspiration is what they really carried them. And that's the only thing I don't like about outlines, is that if that inspiration just bypasses the outline. And I've had to rewrite several chapters before, because that inspiration is like, oh, this idea is so much better than the whole thing I just plotted out. So,
Now, when you say loose outline, do you do like will you say like a couple bullet points or a paragraph, or like how, because I know you do a loose outline so you don't stifle that creativeness, your natural voice that makes you unique in your own writing. But like, do you do like a one line, like when you do your outline, do you do like one line? Or I'm always just very like, I'm in awe of different people's processes. What some people do too much or too little. I'm just curious, like that outline, is it like a sentence, a paragraph? Like how far do you go on that?
I do a sentence because, like I said, sometimes the characters, with my writing, sometimes the characters just decide to just do things on their own, and I can't really fight them too much on that. And then it's like, okay, well, fine, you guys win. Okay, we'll do things that way. Garner actually does a paragraph, and actually, I know publishers, and this is something Margaret Weiss told me, publishers like it when you do a nice outline with the paragraphs, and because it shows, where you're going, and it details everything. So it really depends on what you're going for. But yeah, the loose, just a simple bullet point with a sentence at this chapter is good enough for me. I can fill in the rest. Garner, yeah, he has a nice little organized, with each chapter, with each paragraph, because he sent it to me. And what he was doing is we've just made sure it's a shared world we're working together on.
Right.
So what he's doing is making sure, we don't have any conflicts with the plot or, the story or something like that. So, but yeah, he has a different approach than I do, but it works for him. I like it because it was nice and organized, and I could see where he was going with it. But even then, sometimes he would, have a better idea, and he would just change it right then. He goes, I'm going to change it that way. I was like, fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm the same way. I'm okay with deviating from the plan, but I've heard people they like to know what to expect, so they don't feel like they're sitting there with, like, I guess what you would call writer's block.
Yeah.
But everyone's different. I think it's always cool to know that there is no right way to write other than just write it in the way that's going to work best for you.
Exactly.
Well, I think in writing it so you actually get your work published, that's the workable way, is so you publish your work and you don't do a world building book that's 100,000 words long. Not going to mention who did that, but they're on this call.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's Erica's way of saying that I need to stop making my world Bible and finish my novel, which I hear you.
I'm just going to name drop that. Okay. So, you were at Pensacon. How many conventions have you done?
Quite a few. I've done SunnyCon in the UK. That was and I'm supposed to do that Newcastle upon Tyne this next summer. We got canceled twice, and I just got back from Alabama Comic Con yesterday, and quite a few. I mean, I used to work with Margaret, so I've done Dragon Con, Gen Con, and all that under her. Used to sell her books, so this is really not a new thing. I mean, I had extreme fun selling Dragonlance books and whatever other series she was working on. So I mean, just selling mine was just it was actually easier for me to sell her books because it was like, I don't know, it's easier to sell someone else's because I can sum up their story better than my own.
I agree with
working on your elevator pitch. Got to work on your elevator pitch, my friend.
Yes.
Practice 30 seconds. 30 seconds in the mirror. You have 30 seconds.
That's always it's always an improvement of something to improve every single time. Sometimes I think I have the 30 seconds down and I'm like, I'm boring myself talking, but maybe that's just me. But as for other conventions, yeah, I've done quite a few. I mean, I've done all over, really. I usually try to stick around here, to draw it's cheaper, but I'll be doing probably a few in the UK next summer. Probably, I'm probably going to hit up MCM London. There's some in Birmingham. Definitely, I'm slotted for Newcastle again. So because that never happened because of COVID. Thanks. But But yeah, I do. As for, were you asking how many I do a year or try to?
No, I was just wondering what it was like doing conventions. A lot of authors don't necessarily do them. I was just curious what you thought in doing them and meeting the fans.
Oh, I love it. That's probably my favorite. That gives me more motivation to go back to the the computer and type out my next book, more than anything. So for example, and I meet loads of people. Pensacon, I met, she's actually going to do a pose. She posed, we did a photo shoot. I should introduce her first before I skip that part. So I met Miss June of Playboy magazine from back in 2001. She still models. She's a fantasy. She loves reading fantasy, and she was cosplayed as 2B from Nier Automata. I might have got the character wrong. I haven't played that game yet. So, but she had a great cosplay. So she ended up buying 2 of my books, and we exchanged information. And I said, hey, want to do a cover for my third, or it'd be my 4th book. I want to do a cover for my 4th book because you can pull off this character really well. And then there was another girl, so we got a photo shoot together. I sent it to my artist, a couple of the pictures, so he's in the midst of making that. And yeah, and so I meet people like that. Recently, I met these 2 guys who I have a actual figure statue, a resin statue made of one of my main characters. And and it's pretty expensive, but he bought that. They were really wanting to play the video game, so they joined my Discord, and they're adding a Reddit forum for my series now. I mean, you meet some really kind-hearted people who are just and you won't meet them just sitting behind a computer sometimes, so yeah. I love all the people I meet at the conventions. I met drinking with authors, yes. I wouldn't have met you, you known about any of this if I stayed at home, So that's the really cool thing about the conventions. You really network with a lot of cool people. You meet a lot of fans, especially if you remember your fans' names. Like one guy bought a book from me, my first book. Next year he came back and bought my 2nd book. This year he bought a statue from me, and I remembered his name, and he was like, very, you could tell it. He was like, oh, you remembered me. I was like, of course, I see you every year. So, that's, if I could say anything, treat your fans very well. That's really, they give the motivation. They're supporting you. So.
That's awesome.
Are you self-published or tradition? How are you published?
Godshard series is self-published. I have traditional published in the video game industry. I have some contributions with, if you look up Bitmap Books, I have stuff with them. Actually, I don't have a copy of the book because it sold out, but.
Hey, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted it. I was like, I wrote some about the games on there, and I spent some time on it, and now I can't even get the book. And I wanted to read what the other people who've written on there too. So, it's both. But as far as my series, I do like the control. And as far as my video game, we're probably going to have a publisher for that. We've already had 2 approach us for the video game, but. With video games, when you have and I would even recommend this with even, your books. If you have a publisher approach you, get an attorney, sit down and really have them, because you need to look over those loopholes, because you can really get screwed over on those contracts. And I've seen it with authors, and it happens in the video game industry all the time. And some publishers will be friendly with you until you sign on with them. And but the publishers that approached me, well, one has a pretty big game out. It's on PS4 and all those systems, and great resume. So I'm sure they probably have a pretty good reputation. But with video games, you wait till your video game's almost done before you even consider it. But yeah, for porting to the Switch and all that, I'll be talking to a publisher for that, or someone to port it and produce the physical copies and all that. But yeah, the video game portion of Godshard Chronicles is where the publishers are hitting us up. And actually, most of the people are hitting us up because I think video game industry is booming now, and loads of people play. I was quite surprised by it. So To be quite honest, I didn't, expect that much, but yes. Anyway, sorry, I went on a little tangent.
In the video game world, because I will admit I'm not the biggest knowledge of, I'm pretty like, I play just very basic games. And so do you feel the gaming industry, there's a lot of like I think of like The Witcher, right? The Witcher was a video game and then it was a book, or I'm trying to remember, the video game came first, right?
First.
Book first. He was an author from Poland. Don't ask me to pronounce his name, but he sold the rights to it for a lump sum, really cheap. And then The Witcher 3 got like, game of the year and made all this money. And then he got, he was like, wait a minute, I wish I had royalties now.
Yeah, I always like to think like is that more common now that a lot of these video games also have book series? And you think that helps you because you kind of have a in on both sides to really expand out your world, whether it's books or video games, like showing a new element of your story? Is that a more common thing now?
I wouldn't say it's a more common. Okay, so I talk to a lot of indie devs. Not a whole lot of people who do the story writing for indie games are novelists. It's quite rare. Now, that being said, a lot of video games are getting like the big, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, they get great story writers to produce, their content. But for indie games, it's usually, you'll sometimes have a small team, like a programmer who loved these games growing up, and he also writes a script. So, and you can sometimes see it because, okay, you might want to get an edit, you got too much fluff, edit that and condense that because, because I'll see some script that goes like this long when it can be really just like what I sometimes do. My editor usually gets on to me for that, but yeah, loads of video games, especially the big ones, they'll get decent writers, script writers. And it's really, when people complain about how fewer people read or books aren't, these bookstores aren't doing well, writers are still going to have a job. It's just going to be more in movies and video games because there's always going to be something for writers. We always need writers. It's just they're flipping around where the writers are actually needed. So, and I remember I did, when I was doing conventions, I got the idea for a video game because loads of, young people came up to me, looked at my posters, my banners for my books and said, oh, cool, is this a video game? No. So I got the idea. I was like, well, if I had a video game, I'd have something to sell you. So I started talking to a couple of people, got together a programmer, pixel artists, and started working from there. Now we got some really good people on our team. We got a composer named Noriyuki Iwadare from Japan. He's composed stuff for Lunar series, which is Lunar, Silver Star Story, Lunar Eternal Blue, Grandia, Langrisser. So those are pretty popular JRPG games. He also done arrangements for Super Smash Brothers and such. So I grew up listening to him, so it was kind of strange listening to somebody when you were in middle school, and then now I get to work with him. And then I've had a few actors already approach me for voice acting for the video game. I was like, well, I wasn't planning on doing voice acting, but oh, you do this anime? You work for Funimation? Yeah, I think and she sent me a reel of her, and I was like, oh, that sounds really good. So I couldn't turn her down. So
that's amazing. You said Funimation. That's the one that does all the English dubbing, right?
Yes. So one of that, but with my series, I write in British English, and I also envision the characters, or most of them. So like my main character, I imagine him with more of that brash Northumbrian accent. I imagine like, my female lead character with a more RP accent, like, you would hear kind of around, the south of England. So yeah, it was an American voice actress who contacted me, and but see, the video game has a talking dog, and and when I heard her reel, she had a character that kind of sounded like it. So it sounded like what I thought. So I was like, oh, she could do it perfect. So I said, I do have a dog that can talk, and it's done about in a magical way. So and then I have
I would like to receive that email. I'm a voice actress that would like to do your book. Well, I have a talking dog. I mean,
Erica has to like search for the voice actors for our audiobooks. So
Yes.
it's always interesting to hear all the different kinds of things that she hears. You know, it's interesting being on the other side, hearing people audition for your piece and then making that decision, you know?
Yes, it's although I didn't really host any auditions, she just emailed me out the blue, and then she sent me to her reels. I did ask someone else out of the blue because I played a game called Dragon Quest XI, and so the video game we're working on has my favorite character. I like her better than the ones in my books, actually, because she's just brash. She says whatever is on her mind, no filter. Very strong female character, one of the lead characters. I was like, when I played Dragon Quest XI, there was a character named Veronica, and she was voiced by Lauren Coe, an Irish actress, but she does a more English accent for Veronica. Anyway, I was like, she would be perfect for that character in my game. And so I was thinking, I was like, I interviewed Lauren Coe for RPGamer. So I just sent Lauren an email and I said, hey, do you still want to do voice work for video games? Because she told me that during her interview she did. And she goes, yes. So I sent her the pictures of Ruby, and then I sent her the description, and she just says, I would love to do it. So I got a hold of her agent, and we're going to work on getting Lauren Coe in it. So and she's a really good actor. She's done several movies. I think some of her movies ended up in like up for a couple of awards, but I'm really bad with the film industry. I don't watch Netflix, so don't ask me.
What did you do during COVID? Like, I mean, I read books, but then I think I watched the whole catalog of Netflix. So that's crazy.
During COVID, see, I was a school resource officer during the last year of my career in law enforcement. But during COVID, there's no school, so they have us going on the streets and doing whatnot. And so I was I chased down a 17-year-old kid who had a warrant, and I actually managed to catch him. I told him, I was like, hey, at the time I was, I wasn't quite 40 yet, but I was like, I'm almost 40 and you're 17 and you play football. Why am I catching you? But that's what I was doing during COVID. They had us working. So, So yeah, I was too busy doing that than to write. So, I wish I came to this conclusion sooner, but it was good because there was no conventions and I was able to at least, I guess, earn some money.
No, that's good. Okay, we are actually getting near the end of this podcast, Vanessa. I should have said Vanessa Valente will be hosting today. Co-hosting, it's fine. So Elmon, what advice would you give authors out there?
Main advice, well, okay, so you got your customers. So if you do a convention, you got your customers, you got your fans. You want fans because customers can always change their minds. So always try, and to keep fans, you got to keep your integrity on your writing. I also advise determination. Don't give up. I mean, what I do is when I write is I put time aside. I treat it like a job. I've written these books with a full-time job and doing side hustles, in my spare time for extra cash and overtime. So, and plus, with all of this going on. So, some people make excuses, say I don't have time. Well, but they'll also sit down and watch Netflix for like 2 hours or something like that. Well, there's your time. Well, I'm too tired. Well, I'm tired when I write it, but that's the thing. Don't make excuses. Just treat it like a job. Like you have to be there. And just put in your time doing it, 30 minutes, an hour. And, sometimes when I start writing a chapter, I am so tired. I feel like going to sleep. But, when you get going, sometimes an idea will just pop in and you'll put something really good in. And then other than that, I would say last bit is I always keep the politics off because, say, for example, you go on Twitter or whatever, and you say your political views. Well, you might have a fan of yours that says, oh, you believe in sending all the Earth waste to Mars. Well, I don't. I think that's polluting Mars. Okay, well, I'm unfollowing you, and I'm not buying another book of yours. So, that's the main thing. I would just, I always put my fans first before my opinions or whatever. And I try not to have too many opinions on that kind of stuff anyway, because, I can't really help certain things. So,
That makes sense. Okay. How do people find you? How do people find your books?
They can do on Amazon. We do have www.godshard.com. That's GODSHARD.com. Or, you can just easily search that on Amazon. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Godshard RPG is the name of our handle.
Okay,
That's
perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Awesome. Well, you have been wonderful to have on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
We didn't get to the really crazy stuff. So, maybe
we're going to record a whole nother episode here in just a moment. And we can
your first challenge is a keg stand, right? So you brought your keg, right?
Well, I mentioned to you earlier, someone stole my drink out the fridge I had for this. So, it was a good drink.
I don't think his drink in the fridge was a keg, though, there, Vanessa. I think
his one drink was a keg.
One drink was a keg. Okay, this has been Drinking with Authors, the podcast, my friends. I've been Erica Lance. My co-host has been Vanessa Valiente, and our amazing guest has been Elmon Dean Todd. And we will see you next time.